Hey there, I'm Jackie Ferris. Henry Frances Dupont loved collecting, he loved design, and he loved the great outdoors. Now, all three of those passions have been brought together for a new exhibit called Outside In. We're at Winterthur, where you're about to have an ocular treat. Get ready, the 302 is designing your way. Hello everyone, we are at Winterthur to talk about a brand new exhibit that is absolutely gorgeous. It's called Outside In, and I'm joined by one of the curators here, Kim Collison, to talk a little bit about it. Now Kim, it's always a fantastic pleasure to see you, but we can't really talk about this exhibit until we talk about the very beginning, the beginning of all of the collecting.
Yeah, so this exhibition is actually about Henry Frances Dupont as a collector. And it's in part a celebration of our 70th anniversary at Winterthur. So one of the things this exhibition does is it brings all the pieces of Winterthur together. It celebrates him as a gardener, a collector, a farmer, and a designer. And so we're really thinking about that design here by looking closely at the collections. We're also really pleased to be partnering with the Winterthur Museum of Natural History. They are closed this year for renovations, and so we had the opportunity to bring some of their collections into the gallery, and it gave us the opportunity to really talk about nature as it relates to our collections, which is a perfect fit here at Winterthur because Henry Frances Dupont was so much inspired by the garden and the outdoor landscape here at Winterthur. He considered the landscape when he expanded the house. And what we delve into here is really how he looked at the landscape, the outdoors, the garden, the colors, as he was designing and using the collection inside the house as well.
It's almost as if he wanted the aesthetic to be seamless. You know, when you're outside, you come inside and you still have that freshness and that color and that vibrant life throughout the different rooms. And when you come in, you kind of get a feel for that with the design of, you know, the columns and the walkable. Talk to us a little bit about just the first hello.
You're right. So we welcome visitors to this exhibition in a room that we call the Port Royal Entryway. And it is a space in the house at Winterthur that visitors would have arrived and entered the front door in this entryway. It's a unique entryway, different than most of our houses today, in that it expands the entire width of the house here at Winterthur. And so what that does, and why it's really interesting, is that when you enter the front door, you're immediately greeted by a door on the other side of the hallway. And that door opens to the garden. And so as you entered the house, your eye was immediately drawn to the outside. And in that hallway, you were greeted with wallpaper that was decorated with peonies and birds and flowers and bamboo, all elements of nature that were also here in the garden at Winterthur. So the walls are lined with that nature. Your eyes are brought to the nature outside the space. And one of the things we did here to have fun with that idea is we've displayed that doorway and the wallpaper in the exhibition, but we've put behind it a selection of images from the garden at Winterthur. So there's sort of a video of the imagery from the garden and celebrating that the garden too, if you will. Also, we have this fabulous interactive in the exhibition that features one of the rugs that are from that hallway. And as you walk on the rug, which is something we don't do in the house at Winterthur, of course, we don't walk on collection rugs, but here this is a projected rug. And when visitors walk on it, the rug itself turns into tommies, which are the flowers that would have grown just outside that door that you come into. But Jackie, I think you hit upon something really interesting here, because you said it's almost as if everything is seamless, that the inside and the outside come together. And that reminds me of something that Henry Frances Dupont said, in that one of the things he's quoted as saying is that if you come into a room and you notice any one thing, then it's not supposed to be there. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but I think that's an important way of looking at this, and I think that's one of the things that we've tried to show here, is how that inside and outside come together, and it really is seamless in its design, both in the garden and the house.
There's just so much to look at, and we start at the beginning. What are some of the first things that Henry Frances Dupont collected that would later be reflected in his design?
Right, so he started collecting as a very young boy. He collected birds' eggs and stamps and flowers, which was a tradition in the Dupont family. They often gave one another gifts of nature. We have letters in the archives of him writing back and forth to friends, sharing notes about eggs that they've collected, birds' eggs. We have this image in the back of this case here in the exhibition that features a hornet's nest in a room of his as a young man. And that's one of the objects we borrowed from the Delaware Museum of Natural History, a hornet's nest, to kind of highlight that idea of him collecting as a young man. He then moved, of course, into collecting American objects, but that was later in his life. And what I think is really interesting, though, is that you can see the ways that those early interests are really captured in his collecting. For instance, in one of the cases here, we have countless types of birds, which is obviously from that early interest, and yet we see them in objects reflected in all kinds of different forms.
And butterflies as well.
Butterflies, and the flowers are an interesting part of his collecting. When he was at Groton as a student and then at Harvard, he wrote to his mother frequently about the garden he had there, about the flowers he saw, about bloom times for different things. And at some point when he was in his studies, he actually said that flowers were the thing that brought him the most joy, and then he pursued a degree in horticulture.
Now we're talking a lot about all the treasures of the land, but he also was enamored with things from the sea, and we're going to talk about that when we return.
Hi, I'm Heather Sullivan with Lavender Fields, and we love exploring lavender and nature on the 302.
Welcome back. We're at Winterthur, and we're talking about the breathtaking exhibit Outside In. Now, Kim, if you were to look at some of the displays, especially the one behind us, you might surmise that Henry Frances was a bit of a beachcomber.
Well, he was. He collected shells at his house in Boca Grande. It was an activity that the family enjoyed together. And his collection of shells today actually can still be viewed in Boca Grande. In fact, when he died, the shells were donated to the JF Library Foundation in Boca Grande. For this display, we've been fortunate enough to borrow all these shells from the Delaware Museum of Natural History, and we've selected shells like those that were in his collection. And they're really fascinating to me in terms of how he bridged the collecting of nature and his design aesthetic. So in the house in Boca Grande, not only did he have large cabinets of shell displays like these that he had collected on the beach with his family, but he also had shells embedded into the walls in decorative mosaics. And here at Winterthur, while we don't have collections of shells, we have many, many, many shell-related objects. So we have brought those objects out on view to accompany this shell collection, and are marrying the collection of objects and the collecting of nature and how they overlap here.
It's really, really beautiful. And when you look at it, there's all different kinds of shells that you have on display here. But was there a certain type that, drew his eye?
Well, I think he collected lots of different kinds of shells. We can pull out certain shells that he had in his collection, and he also had in his collection of objects. For instance, there are cowrie shells, which are often used to make small boxes, and we have lots of those in the collection, and some of them are on view here. Some of the small shells that you see in this case are the types that may have been used to create some of the shellwork objects that you can see in the displays. For instance, one of the objects that I'm most excited about bringing out of the house to put on display here in the galleries is a shellwork grotto that would have been made by a young woman in the 18th or 19th century. And working with shells in this form was a form of women's education at the time. This particular grotto is very elaborate, it's large, and it is usually in the house in a space that visitors cannot get close to see it, but it's definitely worth being close and looking at it right up when you can get right in front of it, because you can see the details of how the shells have been used to make flowers and all these flower displays. There are insect wings, acorns, moss, other natural materials in there as well.
It really is breathtaking when you look at it. You sit there and you think to yourself, how long did something like this take? And I guess it doesn't really matter. What really matters is your appreciation of the effort and bringing nature together in such a beautiful way. And when you look through the cases, there are so many things from other animals. There's, for instance, is that a tortoise?
It's a hawksbill sea turtle. Again, another object that came from the Delaware Museum of Natural History, but pairs nicely with all of our tortoise shell objects in the collection, of which there are many. And in that case, we also have objects made of ceramic that are mimicking tortoiseshell. So tortoiseshell is, today you see it in people's glasses all the time, for instance. So now we mimic that material in plastic. There is a small pair of spectacles in here that is actually made of horn that is mimicking tortoiseshell. So in the past, horn could be dyed to look like tortoiseshell. There are lots of other natural materials that are exhibited here, and this is in part a celebration of some work that one of our curators is doing here at Winterthur. Anne Wagner, our curator of decorative arts, has an NEH grant, and she is currently working on studying our organics collection. And so we have the opportunity here to highlight a number of these objects. So we have tortoiseshell objects, we have baleen, we have horn, we have ivory, mother of pearl, coconut, red coral, all kinds of things, many of which today are endangered species and could not be collected, but these were all collected before that was the case.
I guess in speaking of endangered collections, the horn is just, the carving is so intricate, and it really is a work of art, but when you think about how it was acquired, it's understandable that you can't get it today.
It's actually tragic that this rhinoceros horn is fabulous, but unfortunately there are still people hunting rhinoceroses. And I think in some cultures they're believed to have medicinal purposes, but of course they're nearly extinct because of it.
So, but you can look at the things from nature and really appreciate, the beauty that comes from it. Understand, his desire to collect things and preserve things and incorporate them in his design. And in a way, a lot of these things are still, like the tortoiseshell that you mentioned, still in our fashion focus today. So he was really kind of ahead of his time.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. Another area of the exhibition features Palampour with the Tree of Life design, for instance. That design is one that we've seen throughout history in textiles and wallpapers. You can look to pretty recent issues of some of the design magazines and see that motif. Da Vinci had his bedroom decorated in that, for instance. So that particular motif is an example of how Henry Frances Dupont was very much in tune with design, and that was a motif that he used in his bedroom, in fact, and collected several needlework with the motif too.
Now, was that something that was actually used in the home, or was it just, would he collect them and store them? I mean, because that's a beautiful, it's a quilt, right?
No, it was used in his bedroom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so his bedroom was decorated with a bed hanging and a quilt that had the Tree of Life design on it.
That's amazing. And there's so much more that we're going to talk about when we return.
Hello, I am Justice Bennett, and I love rediscovering history on the 302.
Welcome back. We're at Winterthur, and we're talking about the new exhibit, Outside In. And when you walk through the exhibit, Kim, you notice the display here that talks about designing for the seasons. Now, he would change the colors and the motifs as the seasons would roll.
Right, so particularly in textiles in the house, he would change them with the seasons. So some rooms actually had 4 different seasons worth of textiles. So here in the exhibit, we have an illustration of that in one room, the main reception room, what was called at the time. Today we call it the Port Royal Parlor. But we see a set of gold curtains and a set of purple ones. And in the past, textiles in a room were changed for a lot of different reasons. In part, it was a way of preserving them from exposure over time. But in his case, it was very much a design choice to keep the rooms fresh and to change them throughout the year. And I think that we, kind of surmised that that had to do with some of the colors that you were seeing outside the rooms too. So these particular sets of curtains, one is gold, one is purple, and both of those colors are colors that you see in the garden outside the windows of that particular room. And you can see that in some of the other rooms as well.
Now, is this over here a tapestry, the flowers, the pink and the red? Is that a tapestry that, maybe springtime?
No, actually, it's also a piece of fabric that was used as curtains, and it features azaleas. And one of Winterthur's most well-known garden areas is Azalea Woods. Mm-hmm. And so here we see a literal way that he brought the garden into the house in this textile. Interestingly, this textile actually preceded him. His father had used it in a different room, mm-hmm. and then he later used it in the room that was the library at the time. And I think it's just a beautiful example of a textile of the time. It's quite lovely.
It really is, and it shows, I guess, a shared family adoration for azaleas. Talk to me about the color green. That plays a big role in the design here.
Yeah, for sure. So green was his favorite color. He said it was the prettiest color. And what we've done in the exhibition to kind of highlight that, it's a color used on some of the walls. It's a color that's used in a lot of the wallpaper paintings that we've used as a design motif in the exhibition. This exhibition was really fun to do the design for. So our graphic designer, Sally Comport from Art at Large, she worked with us to take some of the wallpapers that are in the house, and she's made them colorful, fantastic illustrations of what they really are. So you can see the patterns of the wallpaper, but she's made them colorized and sort of enlarged and fantastical, but many of the colors used in that are green. We also have a display of glass, and one of the things that he used glass for was color, and he would group pieces of glass of the same color together in a display that really highlighted that motif. And we see that in the garden as well, where groups of colors come together as a statement.
So one of the objects that you told me before we started taping that was your favorite, or one of your favorites, was is it a wood desk or just a table?
It's
Talk
a
to me
dressing
about
table.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a small dressing table, and Henry Frances Dupont loved trees. He loved wood. He was, it's actually said that his collection of Americana really began when he visited the home of Electra Havemeyer Webb at Shelburne, and he saw there a pine dresser filled with pink Staffordshire dishes. And he was so enamored with the color combination of this that he decided to start collecting American furniture and objects. Before that, he'd largely had European collections. And so that particular dresser with the pink Staffordshire is actually here at Winterthur today. It was gifted to us. And we use it as an introduction about his collecting. But it's, I think, a testament to how he was attracted to different woods and the color of wood, the texture of wood. The dressing table that's here in the exhibition is one made of burled wood. So it's formed from a tree burl, which is a growth on the side of a tree, which we have an example of. And what happens is the tree rings and the growth becomes irregular. And you see that in the pattern of the wood, which is really quite beautiful. And so it's one of the many materials from nature that is brought into this exhibition, much like the bamboo furniture you see here. And these pieces were used in many different places at Winterthur, and they're kind of special, I think, to have in this exhibition because they're objects that we wouldn't normally bring into an exhibition. But they're an example of furniture that was used in some of the indoor-outdoor spaces at Winterthur. So when Henry Frances Dupont expanded the house, he really thought about ways that you would experience the garden and the house together. So this furniture was used in the loggia and on the porch outside the loggia, which was an entertainment space where they played games and had drinks and celebrated with their guests. But you can also see images of this furniture. Later in his life, he took this furniture with him when he moved into the cottage, and the house had become a museum. And we also see it in the portrait of Henry Frances that was done by Aaron Schickler.
So it's just really amazing when you walk through and you see all of this. You know, it's still beautiful. You know, if you're trying to decorate your home, I mean, these are amazing ideas that, you know, are still relevant today. And I hope that a lot of people come out and check it out because you guys have done a really good job with the exhibit.
Well, thank you. And bamboo is all the rage right now. So definitely something we can all do.
Excellent. Well, Kim, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. For more information on Outside In, you can visit wintertour.org. That'll do it for this episode of The 302. We're going to leave you with a beautiful flyover of some of the ponds on the Winterthur property. Until next time, I'm Jackie Ferris. Tell them you saw it on The 302.